For the live stream audience, we are just getting started and getting settled, so there may be a few people going in and out of the room as we get going. I'm going to give you a couple quick notes about things that are coming up with CORE, and then I'm going to introduce our speaker, Patricia Lalonde, and let her take over. Okay. We have had a little bit of a change of plans with respect to our May speakers session. Wow, that was very loud and interesting. We've been advertising that we were going to do this Collaborograms session with Scrabble. That has been moved to October. In part, it's in relation to some planning things. In part, it's the Scrabble cycle of competitions. So we're going to be doing it in October instead. So May 2nd, we're still going to have a session, but we have scheduled in a session that is more of a workshop in relation to working with people with coming from an introverted personality preference in a negotiation and a mediation. So we've got a number of people who are going to be coming in to speak about different ways that people work in negotiations and mediations. So I encourage you to actually think about the topic and bring ideas and things, because we'll be doing a bit more of a workshop than usual that session. Need to highlight May 5th to 7th. Game Jam, people, come on, Game Jam. We still have some room, and we need some people coming out to the Game Jam. We're going to be creating collaborative games. You're there the Friday evening playing some games, making teams, and then we work 10 to 6 Saturday, and 10 to more like 4 on Sunday, because we're doing some presentations and playing our games. So really encourage you to come out, and I encourage you to talk to me, to Darcy, or to Amanda, who've all been at different game jams and part of actually carrying the games on later. So have a chat with us after if you've got questions about it. June 6th, Patricia Barkaskas is confirmed to come and talk about reconciliation from the perspective of truth before reconciliation, the need for real understanding and truth around what has been occurring before we can move forward with the reconciliation process. So we're quite looking forward to having her there. The final thing I want to highlight in terms of our activities, we are confirmed, September, we're going ahead with a speed geeking session. And so for everybody here, okay, I've been told I'm not doing a very good job of explaining what speed geeking is. But our concept is anybody who is involved in the dispute resolution area in any kind of way and interested in a topic. So you specialize in a little area of arts, Jim, and you think there's something really cool about it that people don't necessarily see how it applies to dispute resolution. You tell us you're going to do a speed geek moment. You get 5 minutes to do a little talk. We have a 5-minute Q&A afterwards. We also bring in decent film cameras. Darcy's going to come in with her actual camera as well as this. So as well as live streaming, we'll be capturing decent video that you can use yourselves and we can use to post great ideas about new concepts in dispute resolution. It can come from any area. It can be a new book you read. It can be just something that you found that was really exciting and you want to share. And we're hoping to get a whole bunch of people to come up and share their really cool and interesting concepts, just to really stimulate some ideas. We're doing it purposely in September, so you've got ideas over the summer, so that you're doing your summer reading, so that you're going off on vacation and coming up with a new cool thing that you saw somewhere else in the world. All of those are things we want to see. Okay, so I encourage everybody here to think about taking a moment and thinking about 5 minutes for speed geeking. Now, I will also say, I hope everybody knows that we have the new mediators group, which will start this evening, 6:30, so we'll have a little bit of a break in between the 2 sessions. But if you want to stay on for that, we're really excited about a planning meeting today and figuring out what people need who are new mediators, what we can provide, how we can work together, how we can come up with ways to look at mentoring, co-mediation, niche marketing. It can be anything, and it's going to be all about location, times, everything that works for the group as best as possible. So love to have as many of you stay as possible. Whether or not you see yourself as a new mediator, those of you who see yourselves as more experienced mediators, we need mentors too. We need that interaction to talk about the ways that things develop. And we need to have those one-on-one conversations to get to know people in the industry. So we're really encouraging mentors to come out as well. And with that, Patricia Lalonde, I'm really excited. No, come on up. I'm not going to do a big speech about you. don't know, Patricia doesn't know me well enough to know I'm not gonna go off on this big thing. I'm gonna let you talk about yourself, Patricia. But I think everybody knows that you come from the collaborative practice area and that you're a financial planner and that you're gonna be talking about financial mediation and the ways to use those documents. So I'm gonna turn it over to you and let us know if you need any help with lighting things up.
All right, thanks a lot,
Thanks.
Sharon. And thanks to all of you too. This is really exciting for me to be able to talk to you. And before I get started, I just want to mention that there's an elephant in the room. It's been in my room for 2 months now, and it is the paralysis in my face. 2 months ago, I had surgery to remove a tumor behind my ear. And before the surgery, unfortunately, they lost the biopsy. Didn't know what we were dealing with. Thank God, it was benign. Unfortunately, when your surgeon looks at you in recovery and says, "Oh, I'm so sorry," it's not a good thing. So he bumped my nerve. My face is paralyzed. My blinker doesn't work, and my dimple's broken. But just try to imagine that this is, I've never been so excited about getting my wrinkles back. So anyway, this is who I am. My brain's still here, and I'm very happy to see you all. But you know, I've been thinking about this elephant in my room. And the elephant that people have in their rooms in relationship is money. Like, at what point in a relationship do you say, "So, tell me how you manage money"? First date? Third date? When you're getting married? You know, it's really outstanding how awkward that conversation is. We're Canadians, we're kind of shy about these things too, you know. But there's a real parallel when I thought about, yeah, that is truly the elephant in the room. So I'm here today to talk to you about what I do and how what I do for our clients is going to help you shine for your clients. And I'm going to try to break it down and take my time and open up to questions and such, but I have organized my thoughts in a certain pattern, so I'm going to try to stay with my organized thoughts.
And Patricia, maybe I'll just interrupt rudely at that moment to remind people and be conscious that some people here haven't been at one of our talks. We have a directional microphone, so to the extent that Patricia's inviting you to engage in conversation, you need to be at this side of the table to do it, or our live stream audience can't hear you. And it really doesn't matter that you're really loud and yelling from the back. It's directional. You still have to get to this side of the table. So please be aware that you're going to get called to, you don't have to be on screen, you just have to be up.
Thanks a lot, Sharon. Yes. And welcome to our live screen audience too. It's so weird that we can't see your faces or can't hear your voices. I know you're out there. I don't know how many you are or where you are, but welcome. And please be involved in the conversation. What I want to do is guide you through the process that's involved in financial mediation. And you're going to learn about those theories and skills and processes in what I do as a financial mediator and creating the document that helps all of us. I'm going to teach you a little bit, not so that you have to do it yourselves, but I want to teach you how that document is formulated, how I created it, and how it's going to help you and your clients. I want you to also understand how financial mediation unfolds in the room. It's a little different from, you know, what we all think of as mediation, but in many ways it's the same. I also want to teach you a little bit about how I work as a financial neutral and collaborative practice. We have a lot of parallels between collaborative and mediation and some differences as well. But that's toward the end. So what I first wanted to say is that working as a financial mediator takes the liability off the shoulders of mediators, lawyers, and coaches. Because I've had so many lawyers say, I don't want to touch that. What do I know about those tax rules, etc.? So that's really important. The other thing I do is we create one clear financial document, and that's a really solid foundation for dispute resolution going forward, and I'm going to talk more about that as well. The other thing, I educate both clients, one or both clients, so that they're on a level playing field as regards their financial situation. And then I will mediate those conversations about the division of assets and liabilities. So, of course, in my world, money is the main topic of dispute, because that's what I get in my office. But even so, I mean, it's our children and it's our money. And when I used to work in the bank a million years ago, it was like, they're our children. Our money is so important to us. Of course it is, for so many reasons. It's not just dirty paper. I would come, you know, at the end of the day, working in the bank, handing out money, this is like seriously a long time ago, right? But it was really dirty paper. But everything is involved with our money. Our sense of pride, our sense of self-worth, security, love. So no wonder when we're ending a relationship, the relationship part is all emotion. And over here we've got the money that's also tangled up with emotion. And trying to have those conversations can be extremely difficult. My son, I'm not at all proud of him, but he's a PhD. And his work is on the brain. He's a researcher at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto. And anyway, I could go on and on. But anyway, the point is we've had this discussion often. And when a person's under stress, the blood will go to one part of the brain or the other. And if you're under stress, it's going over to the emotional part. And you don't need a physicist to tell you that. You can experience it. And so the point is that there's a physical reason why, welcome, a new member. There's a physical reason why we have so much trouble doing arithmetic and making logical decisions when we're going through an emotional process. So it can be confusing. And that's why for a long time I've believed, and in my experience I know, that it's vitally important when people are talking to a financial expert at a time like that, they're vulnerable. And it's really important that they're talking to someone who does not have a vested interest in the financial decisions they make or the products and services they want to buy. I'm going to stress that because, you know, there's so many really, really good people in the financial world. But sometimes you have to know who you're talking to and just be careful of that vulnerability. So another point is that, back to the relationship part, you know, we're talking about the emotional aspect, but, you know, maybe in your own life, and certainly with people you know, usually one or the other person is more interested and skilled at taking care of the financial matters. So it usually falls to the one who's like, I love doing this stuff, you know, and the other one's like, I'm not so much. I want to do what I want to do. So usually one person has control. In the best of circumstances, they communicate together and they work on it together, but it's not always so. So that imbalance of knowledge and skill and awareness can often lead to some mistrust. As they're going through separation, the one who hasn't been involved, like all of a sudden they're required to learn everything, understand everything, know their situation, and make, you know, an informed decision about how to proceed. That's difficult. That mistrust sometimes is hard to unbundle. Another part of it is that people own a full spectrum of investments, savings plans, financial vehicles, everything from, a house to an RRSP to a pension. And, and I mean our home and our rental properties, all kinds of stuff. And then on the other side, people have loans and mortgages and credit cards. Sometimes people come into the relationship with assets and liabilities, gifts, inheritances. We have to unbundle that stuff too. And I'm talking primarily family practice too, but a lot of these concepts apply no matter what part of mediation you're doing, because it's often about money. So each of these financial vehicles, as I call them, that I've mentioned, each one has its own set of rules, tax rules, fees, penalties, time frames, all kinds of things that if you don't know what you're talking about and say, oh, well, you take this and I'll take that and everything's fine. No, not necessarily so. No, and we've all heard the stories of, somebody who just thought that was hunky-dory, and 10 years later they realize, oh my goodness, or even 10 weeks later. So it can be a real minefield, unbundling all of that stuff, to bring the clients to a level understanding and to help them to create an agreement that they're both going to be proud of. So when people are informed and have an understanding there's a level playing field, the solutions that they reach, the agreements they reach, are so much more effective and long-lasting. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really passionate about what I do. I love my work. My dad, when I was a little kid, numbers are fun. I'm sure, Dad. But yeah, I mean, one of my favorite games is Sudoku. Not everybody feels that way, but yeah, numbers are fun. And Jim was telling me earlier about construction and how we can see spatially. My dad was a design draftsman, and I can see spatially, and I thought everybody could. But also, I can see, like, numbers, not to sound weird or anything, but numbers open up this whole, I don't know, I can see them in a different way, I guess, than most people can, because they make some kind of sense to me. I don't have to sit with the calculator and figure out, because it gives me a concept. It tells me stories like you wouldn't believe. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent, but you know what I mean, Jim, right? Mm-hmm. This spatial concept and such. So I love what I do. Because the number part of it is fun, and the relationship part is really fascinating. So just to tell you a little bit about me, I know I've just gone on here, but I've had some really nasty divorce experiences in my own life. My ex-husband, there was a peace bond issued against him, and that was a terrifying experience for me and my sons, my young sons. And that's a story for another time. I'm not going to go in that tangent. But the negative impact on me and my sons, it was led me on a long path, actually, to where I am now. And I love this quote. The content of my life is the curriculum for my evolution. I'm so grateful for my life, and my sons are just awesome men that I'm so proud of. People say, oh, how old are your children? They're bald. Not the young kind of bald. But yeah.
I think Darcy was bald for a really long time.
Not anymore. But after that, my path includes 3+ decades of working with people and their money. I was among the very first I shouldn't say very first, but among the very beginning of financial planners in Canada. I was among that group, and I was in the top 10% of financial planners in Canada. And I'm really proud of that. I was in a little town of 50,000 people, but I loved my work and people referred to me. My point being, it's not about boasting, it's about passion. And it's about the relationship. Because when you're talking to people, we all know as mediators, my gosh, how grateful are we, how blessed are we to be taken in to those so private conversations that they have, that we can help them through a really trying time in their lives. And the same thing goes with numbers. I've sat at like 1,000 kitchen tables talking to people, and their kids would say, "Oh, Pat's coming," and you know, it was just great. But that's the level that we need even when we're talking about money. And I know you thought mine would be all about charts and diagrams, and I'm not. They're there, but that's in my tool belt. But so anyway, that was all in Ontario, and 12 years ago I gave up all my licenses to sell investments and insurance, and I moved from Ontario to Vancouver, and I discovered collaborative practice. And I thought, this is like, talk about curriculum for my evolution. It just made so much sense. So that's when I gave up my licenses and started doing what I'm doing now. And it's been really interesting because people can't figure, how does a financial person mediate? Well, you know what? That's what we do. When you're sitting at a kitchen table with a couple who haven't really talked about money before, and you're helping them to communicate, create goals together, that's mediation, you know? And it just makes so much sense to me. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. One family, I started working with them 15, 16 years ago, and you know, 2 babies crawling around on the rug and such, and I saw them again just last year, and they said, you know what, because of the work that we did, well, maybe it was more than 16 years, because they said both kids are in university, our mortgage is paid off, we go traveling every year, you know, that, you know, to see that transition. And when we are mediating, that's the kind of transition that we want to help our clients get through. Whether it's a civil mediation or a family mediation, I believe that what we're trying to do is help them to transition through that disagreement or misunderstanding to have a new relationship, to have a new going forward kind of situation. I'm telling you all about my passions, but the concrete part of this is that I believe that when both parties are involved in creating their financial document, you're having a better solid foundation for a resolution. We can have 2 clients, 2 lawyers, and no matter what, if they're collaborative or if they're litigation, and they create 2 separate financial documents, what are the odds that those documents are going to be exactly the same? It's like practically 0. For so many reasons, either they picked the wrong date or they, you know. So having one neutral person in the middle of that conversation with the clients, that is a foundation for a good resolution. Because both clients are contributing the information. We're sitting in the room together, not always. Sometimes it's separate, but I make sure that they both know I'm neutral and we're communicating together. Whether it's shuttle mediation or on the phone or whatever, but I'm gathering the information. And then at some point, 99% of the time, we sit in the same room together. I prefer it when we sit, and I will tell you more about process, but I prefer it when we sit in the room together at the very beginning and get our bearings, And then I do my thing, and then we come back and have our conversations. But lawyers are saying, and and mediators, like, what a difference. Because they agree, as opposed to going to battle over this number and that number. And there's usually a really logical reason that those two numbers are different. But you can communicate that and you can figure it out. So I want to talk to you a bit about the process. So I think I made it pretty clear. I mean, when I'm taking I or any financial specialist, when we take that responsibility away from the other team members for having all the financial information and the rules and such, that's a huge load off of the other team members, of the liability. You don't want to put yourself in a position to say, well, this RRSP and that pension are the same, so you just take, no, not necessarily so. That's a big responsibility if you put that on paper and they sign it and that's their agreement, and then they find out that that wasn't the case. So that's part of it. So lawyers are skilled and trained in law, and they spend years doing that. Coaches, psychologists are trained in psychology and all of their skills and the years of practice and training and experience. Mediators, what I'm loving about being part of the mediation group, there are so many backgrounds. It's so fascinating that people come from this area or that area and bring those skills together, and then we share our skills in mediation and those communication skills. So we each have our areas, and financial people are trained in finance. So that's our specialty. And the other thing about it, every year requiring continuing ed credits the way anybody else does, and the experience of doing what you do. So the process, I'll just sort of walk you through, and maybe I should slow down and see if there are any questions. Any comments or questions, observations? No? Okay. Okay. If I'm going too fast, also let me know. But anyway, with my process, oftentimes it's a referral. When someone calls, it's a referral from either their other mediators or their like a psychologist or a coach who's helping them with counseling because they're having trouble in a relationship, lawyers, and sometimes it's referrals from someone else that I've worked with or they know. So usually when someone calls, they have some idea of why they're calling me. So I'll have a little conversation with them. I like to give about a half hour to each person, stressing also that I'm neutral. And just get a little bit of background and find out, do you want mediation or collaborative? What's your process? And a little bit about your story. And I make sure too that the other partner calls so that we can arrange the same conversation so that we're having equal airtime. Because usually it's like, I'm all right and the other one's all wrong. Have you ever heard that before? This is my story. The other part in family is screening for family violence. And I have that training, and I have a form that I send. Usually though, if they've been to see a lawyer or a coach, they've already done the screening over there. So I get their permission also once we're organized to speak to their other team members. But screening for violence is very, very, very important. And because I've been through it myself, I have some idea of what that sounds like. And I can pretty much pick up on it, but still, I need to hear it from them. So in part of those conversations, we talk about process. Are they litigating, mediating, collaborative? And once again, if they've been to their lawyers, they've already made those decisions, but oftentimes I'm part of making that decision too. The other thing I want to say though, whether they are going the collaborative route with a lawyer or the mediation route, I can still work as well, I'm still neutral in either case, but I can kind of work as a mediator even in those two situations. We're kind of feeling our way through as well, because it's kind of new territory, you know? So creating it as we go. And as we all have discovered, every single person or couple that sits in our office, it's a different story. It's like that, and that's, to me, that's part of the challenge and part of the reward. It keeps us from getting bored. This is not boring work. And we have to be adaptable, I believe, being flexible and adaptable to what the clients need. So anyway, so figuring out what process they're using, and then I send them a list. I made up a list of the documents that I require, and it flows along with my financial document, which also flows along with the Form 8, which we need in family practice for the disclosure of financial information. And then, you know, I send them my agreements and such. I like them to be able to read it over so that we're not spending extra time in my office at their cost. And then they read it over beforehand, and then we discuss it when we're together and they sign the documents. So we arrange a first meeting, and as I said earlier, I typically like that first meeting to be with both of them together. Sometimes that's impossible, so we work around that, but typically it's best either they've scanned their documents to me or they bring all their documents with them to that first meeting. But you know, I've already spoken to each of them, but it's really interesting to see them in the room together. And the other part that I find for my work, when they're in that first meeting and they're sitting together in my office, we're talking about money, we're talking about documents, and I get a really good sense of who knows what and where the communication problems happen around that subject. So it's really informing me about everything. Stressing my neutrality. Have I said that more than once? I think so. But you know, sometimes somebody's trying to convince you that their point of view is the right one. I have to remind them. So after we do that first meeting, my natural process is to take away all their documents and create my financial document, and I'll be showing you that in a few minutes. And in the process of creating that, there are often phone calls back and forth and papers missing and such. So that's a bit of a process in itself. And as I tell people, they say, how long is this going to take? You know what? It's up to you. How well organized are you? If you get your stuff to me in a nice organized way, and you get all that stuff to me, it's up to you how efficient you are, and it's up to you too how much you really want to talk. You know, how much time do we need to talk these things out? That's really important. And I don't have a whole lot of control over that. So that's how much time it's going to take. You know, it's, people try to really nail me down, but I don't know what their situation is. So I follow up each session after we've done a mediation session. I do a memorandum of understanding, as we all do, and get that off to them, so that includes their homework list as well as what's been resolved. And then they're off for independent legal advice with their memorandum and their financial document, and copies also of all of their financial paperwork. So that's my process. Any questions? Does that fit with what your expectations would be? Yes? Yes, Jim?
I hear.
Oh.
He knows I'm going to call him on it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Close enough there?
Yeah, you're good. Oh.
I hear a number of different things that we've been warned against, providing legal advice, for example, and so on, and stuff like this. Financial advice, I imagine, would fall into the same kind of another profession's little bailiwick or area of service, no? So how do you, when you give financial advice, how do you stay away from stepping over that line where you become responsible for the advice that you're giving? And that was one question. The other question I had, in my own case, I'm sitting with my then wife at the kitchen table, and we say, okay, we're going to separate, and there's no ill will of any sort. We want to do it like you suggested. There are considerations. That, to me, would be a really great starting point for any discussion. If you want to do it in the best possible way, here is a little pattern. So those are my questions.
Thank you, Jim. Brilliant, exactly right. As well as my neutrality, the other thing I'm a parrot about is I don't give legal advice. I am not a lawyer. I do not give legal advice. No, I do not give legal advice. But you're absolutely right. The type of financial advice I give, because I'm not selling anything, the type of financial advice I give is about rules and penalties and such. You know, it's not about you should do this or you should do that or I think. It is about, okay, we're looking at this scenario. If we do this scenario this way, this is what happens with that. You know, as far as taxes or penalties or whatever. And I think that's exactly what I'm there for, is to educate about those things. So I guess you would call it educating and informing as opposed to advice. Advice, I think of it along the lines of this investment for your time frame would be ideal kind of thing, or you know, you should have this kind of insurance or that. In general terms, you know, we can have those discussions in a way, but I will also, for people to put their plan in place, I try to, if they don't already have someone helping them, I will give them some suggestions, some recommendations, referrals about people that I think would be a good personal fit, because those people who are providing them with an investment plan or insurance or whatever, or you know, tax preparation or whatever, they need to have a relationship with those folks too, and it's really important that they get along. So does that answer your question as far as advice, like financial advice?
I just wanted to highlight that
Yeah.
question, you know, that where do you draw the line?
Exactly.
Or how do you do it so it doesn't breach?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm going to be touching on a few of those things a little farther along in my presentation as well.
And my really big question is how, if you get two people that
really big question you don't have to stand up for. I let you get away with the little.
Well, okay, I come to you and I say, I want to do it and we want it to be fair, you know? So I like to work from purpose. What is the purpose of this discussion? We want to be parting in the best way possible.
Yes.
That discussion. How do
I handle that?
Yeah.
Ah. Okay. Well, you know what? That's a great question too, Jim. Sorry that I skipped over it. In that part of it, what I find is once they're informed about the rules, once they're educated about what they have, clarified about what they have, and educated about the rules involved, it becomes clear to them what makes sense and how they can do that in a really fair way. And I'm going to be touching on that some more too, but sometimes we'll do what-if scenarios and do the calculations in a spreadsheet or whatever. And again, you know, they can say to me, what if we do this or what if we do that? So we work out the numbers and then they can go to their lawyers for their independent advice. Or if they're, you know, they might say, this is the way we want it, and that happens a lot too. This is the way we want it. Once they know all the rules, then that's their decision. And that's what part of what I love about alternative. We call it alternative. We'd like it to be the regular route, but ADR, alternative dispute resolution, that people have a say in their own solutions, as opposed to there's an analogy that I love. We know our story. We know, and pretend we could write our whole life story on one 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, you know, and you've got the whole story, whether it's 20 years or 60 years or whatever. But you take that to someone else and explain it, or to a judge, and you fold that paper in half, and you fold it in half, and you fold it in half until it's this big, and you can't. That's how much of your many years of life story that person gets to know and make a decision for the rest of your life. And I think a lot of you have heard this analogy before, but that's what I love about ADR, about mediation and collaborative practice, is that people have a say. Once they know the rules and they know the implications of their decisions, they're entitled to make a decision. And they're entitled to be informed about what the repercussions are of their decisions, but still, it's in their control. I got a little off track there. Thank you for your questions, Jim. But is everyone in the webinar audience there okay, or?
I'm getting positive comments that things are going well and everything.
Oh.
I got the comment, Darcy must be there.
Oh.
Because it's all working.
Oh, good. Okay,
That's the
good.
truth.
But no questions so far.
Okay. So, just trying to get myself back here. So, just in talking about creating that one clear financial documentation for their agreement. The other part of creating this, the other important part, when you're working with in family, but also in civil, when there's somebody who has a business or a private practice, guideline income becomes a really important factor. And that's where, you know, lawyers will often ask me to come in for help, because is guideline income, like, is everybody familiar with guideline income before okie dokie. Guideline income, if you have a T4, there's your income. You have a job, there are deductions, there's your income. And that's what the courts use to determine support obligations, child support, spousal support. So that's pretty clear, no problem. When there are two people with two T4s, no problem. When you have one or both people self-employed or a business, guideline income becomes really complicated. Because think about a person who has a business and they use part of their home as an office, and they use the family car for going. Just taking those two, that's pretty simple. Write off a portion of those expenses against their business income. So it reduces their business income and changes the whole view of things in a way, because they say, oh, well, I'm only making $20,000 a year. No, there are a whole lot of other things. The other part of that, I don't want to get in too deep to all of the ways, but Jim, I mean, I keep picking on you, but in construction, we know that there are lots of ways that people have taken business expenses away from family expenses. And the other part of that, when a company has a holding company, what a business person might do is take all of their profits and put it in a holding company. They're not taking it into personal income. It's not going to show on their income tax return. It's just sitting there. So once again, this person could have made $100,000, but we write off the car expenses, we write off half the house when we're not really entitled to. We put a bunch of the profits over here in the holding company. We go on business trips that are actually holidays and write it off. You know, you've got a business trip, you go to the conference for 3 days, and then you take a 2-week family holiday and write the whole thing off. The extremes I'm talking about are not legitimate, but a lot of that stuff is legitimate. CRA is like, yep, we're allowing you to do that. We know it's a challenge to have your own business, and there are lots of tax benefits to having that. But it changes the flavor. It's okay for CRA to a degree, but it's not okay for guideline income. You can't be going, sorry, careful for my terminology, but when we think about somebody who's going away on big expensive long holidays and drives a Porsche and has, you know, like we're talking this lifestyle and claiming this income and saying, oh, I can't pay child support at that degree because really this is my income. The truth lies somewhere in between, and that's the challenge. And getting at that truth involves looking at the company tax returns, and I'm entitled for the last 3 years to look at the company tax returns and the personal tax returns and figuring out expenses and talking to them about lifestyle and getting a list of what are your personal expenses, what are the business expenses. Arithmetically impossible. You know, like I had to say that to somebody the other day. This arithmetic doesn't make sense. And you know what? They laugh. Usually, if I'm lucky. We can laugh about it and say, oh yeah, right, okay, let's think about this and how it really works. So it's that part of it, you know, that's vitally important for going forward. So guideline income is an interesting subject. I do not get involved in determining spousal income. There are rules around child support, but spousal support, the support issues go to the lawyers. That's not my department, but I provide them with the information to create that. As you can imagine, it's best having those conversations. I'm best when I communicate first with the self-employed individual, and we have kind of a come to Jesus kind of, you know, like, let's get straight about this. I've usually also talked to the other spouse about lifestyle and those expenses. So, you know, when we're neutral and we're trying to do something that's fair and right, they usually understand. So when we come together, the three of us in the room, and have that conversation about what the real guideline income should be, I look to them to agree, to come to a consensus about, yeah, this is what really makes sense. Because on the one person's going to want it to be high, the other one's going to be wanting it to be low, but in there the numbers are going to make sense. So as you can imagine, that conversation can be a little tricky at times, but it's important to have it. the next area I want to cover is the financial document that I've talked about. And I'm just going to pull it up on the screen here.
And for those who are online, just in case there's any difficulty seeing it through the camera, we did post it. Patricia sent it ahead. So if you go to the core website, coreclinic.wordpress.com, I believe, it's just on the front page of the blog, and you can actually open it there, so you should be able to read it better on your desktop.
Awesome. Thank you, Sharon. I tell you, early and working with Darcy and Sharon beforehand with their magic is really beneficial. So, using my years of experience as a financial gathering information, putting that together with the Form 8 financial document that we use in the province, I've created this Excel. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and you know, it's my work, so this is what I will share with you if and when we work together. And there are a number of pages, and I'm going to walk you through them and tell you the logic and the concepts behind the different areas on these pages. Okay? So, first one's self-explanatory. It's about personal information. I want to know the date of cohabitation and marriage as well. And sometimes, you know, it's not as clear as I thought it might be. But the other information is about the kids. I ask, you know, how old are the kids? What are their names, birth dates, and such? But I usually use this as the opportunity to stress how important it is to keep the kids in the middle of this conversation. Keeping families out of court, I think, is our highest goal. And keeping children out of the conflict, I think. And I haven't seen anybody disagree with me, so it's kind of a motherhood issue. But yeah, this is when we can talk about the children. Sometimes they show me pictures, and the way I like to express it is that, and now that I'm a grandmother, I can say, you know, let's create something here that you're going to be proud of for the long term, that you're going to be proud of when you're grandparents, and you can go together and see your grandchildren, and you can be proud that you've still taken care of your family. And to a greater or lesser degree, depending on who I'm talking to, that's the message that I like to get across, and it's always well received, sometimes with tears, but you know, depends again on who we're talking to. But this is also the page where we can get information about employers and previous employers and self-employment. And another piece of information that I like to get on this page, and it's just something that I will often tuck away in the back of my mind, when they've had previous employers, those previous employers, they might have had pensions with those previous employers. And you'd be surprised how many people forget that they had a pension somewhere else and it's still sitting there, you know. So that's important, and it comes up later in the discussion. So that's the first page. And I want to say too that we don't need every one of these pages for every client, so we just eliminate the pages that are unnecessary rather than overburdening ourselves. This next page is about income, and the income information is taken off of the tax returns, and the lawyers certainly need that. This is again for calculating. Now, you know, as I was saying earlier about guideline income, the one part of this, yes, here is the tax return, but the guideline income on a self-employed person is not going to show up the same way. This is where we run into that problem where tax return shows 26,000 of income. Must be poor. I mean, I'm not making a judgment, but you know, how do you live this lifestyle and have that income is the issue. So that's where the memorandum of understanding comes in, and other charts and diagrams that we can make up to clarify that discussion. So farther down on here, I look at the last 3 years of tax returns for their line 150 and line 236 income. The next page is expenses. With expenses, once again, people are in transition. So expenses when? Expenses before we separated, expenses now, mine expenses, your expenses, what we hope to have, that can be confusing. So there's a list for the one spouse and there's a list for the other spouse. And no matter how we do it, the conversation is at least opened up. Sometimes there's a list, a standalone list that I've created. I can show it to you, but it's similar to this. And when there are people who have all of a sudden, they're the ones who didn't take care of the finances before, and they're like, oh my gosh, a budget. Whoa, how do I do that? So I have a template that I can send to them, and it's like, oh wow, this is so exciting. It's like they get really excited about it because they feel like they have some control. They have some clarity about how this can work for them going forward. So that is really helpful. Oftentimes too, we have somebody couch surfing and the other one's still in the house with the kids, you know, so it's sort of complicated. But this, which seemed like such a straightforward conversation, really isn't. Because this is the conversation about expenses where the hopes and dreams, we shine a light on those hopes and dreams that they have had in their past. And there are often strong emotions around this conversation because it's like, I don't want to move out of the house. I love this house. I planted those flowers. This is my house and I want my kids to be here and I want us to stay here. And gosh, that's